الحمد لله الذي وفق العاملين لطاعته فجعل سعيهم مشكورا وأسبل من نعمه للتائبين فأصبح وزرهم مغفورا صلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, the topic for today will be brief, and we always talk about some of the things that we should seek out or try to implement throughout Ramadan. But I have one hadith for y'all that will set a guideline to this topic, and inshallah we would come out learning about two traits of the Prophet ﷺ. It was narrated عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنه قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أو كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أجود الناس بالخير وكان أجود ما يكون في رمضان حين يلقاه جبريل وكان جبريل يلقاه عليه السلام يلقاه في كل ليلة في رمضان حتى ينسلخ يقرأ عليه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم القرآن وكان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان أجود بالخير من الريح المرسلة وكما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم was one of the most generous of mankind, and he was the most generous in Ramadan. Jibreel alayhi salam would come to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم and he would revise the Quran with him. But when the time of Ramadan came, he would come to him every single night in Ramadan. And the Prophet ﷺ would revise the Quran with him. And then, in the hadith towards the end, the likes of the Prophet ﷺ, his generosity is compared to الريح المرسلة, meaning that it's a quick, fast wind. And the wisdom in this description is that when people are in a moment of drought and they're seeking rain and they're wishing for water to come to their aid, right? When that wind comes and it's very strong and it's powerful and it comes very fast, know that it will come with a lot of clouds that will water the soil. This was how the Prophet ﷺ was in his generosity. When the Prophet ﷺ came and he stood among people, people would rely on his generosity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more generous than him. In Arabic, this is called al-jud, which means vast and abundance in giving. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ajwadul ajwadeen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most generous. But from his mercy, he created this in his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. During the time before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was revealed to, his own wife is witness of this. Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her, our mother of believers. She says that when the Prophet ﷺ was narrated, when the Prophet ﷺ came to her scared, thinking that he was bewitched, thinking that they've done magic to him, and he seen Jibreel alayhi salam for the first time, and he came to her saying, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, right? Cover me up. She said, do not worry, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not disgrace you. Kalla, wallahi la yukhzika Allahu abada, right? And then she mentions certain traits of him. She says, إِنَّكَ لَتَصْدُقُ الْحَدِيث وَتَصِلُ الرَّحِيمِ وَتَحْمِلُ الْكَلِّ, right? وَتُعِينُ عَلَى نَوَائِبِ الْحَقِّ. She says that you're among those that always speak the truth. You're the one that helps the needy and the poor. You're the one that comes to the aid of the people that people neglect. And she says, you're the one that always calls to truthhood. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never disgrace you. Don't think this is what you think it is, right? And then after confronting him and making him feel at ease, she went about, and as we know, she reached out to Waraq ibn Nawfal, right, her relative, and to ask him about this revelation. So this was the Prophet ﷺ pre-revelation. What about him during the revelation and his generosity? It was narrated that a nomad came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he says that Rasulullah ﷺ, if he was asked something, he would never say no. He says that if the Rasulullah ﷺ was asked something alal Islam, he would never ever say no in the name of Islam, right? So then a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked him for some sheep that were literally in between two mountains, like a flock of sheep, right? And the Prophet ﷺ gave it to him. Told his companions to give all those sheep to this poor needy man. This man went back to his family. He said, Ya qawm, aslimu. أسلموا فإن محمدا رجل أو فإن محمدا يعطي عطاء لا يخشى الفاقة. He says that Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him, is a person that gives, and he gives like he does not even fear poverty. That's how generous the Prophet ﷺ was, right? He's calling on to his people to bet on the generosity of the Prophet ﷺ, and he's astonished by this. He's saying, this in itself is a reason to follow this man, right? Because of the akhlaq that he has. So imagine how the Prophet ﷺ was throughout Ramadan. When you're supposed to show and embody the best of traits of the Prophet ﷺ and the best within you, look at the Prophet ﷺ throughout his life. Before revelation and after revelation. Before revelation and after revelation. This is the month where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayat, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if my servants ask about me, then let them know that I am near, right? I listen to the prayers of those that call on to me. Imagine the mercy or the value of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealing a verse like this. A verse that always brings comfort to those that are in despair, that are depressed, right? That are bothered or overwhelmed by burdens. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it in this month, the month that we are in. There's so much virtues to this month. And a lot of people talk about it throughout the time. The first virtue that I would call everyone onto, and first is myself, is the virtue of generosity. The Prophet ﷺ was generous in wealth. He was generous in knowledge. He was generous in his time, to his family, and those that he did not know. This was Rasulullah ﷺ. And this was whom he described about himself. He says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مُكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. He says that I was only sent for one single purpose. Only sent just to complete good manners, right? So this was the manners of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is what we should look up to. That's the first thing. The second thing. The second benefit in that hadith that were narrated about Jibreel coming to the Prophet ﷺ in Ramadan was the aspect of Quran, revising the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. He describes this month, the month of Ramadan, as one single description. Aligns it with the revelation of Quran. That's pretty much what Ramadan is, right? That's the biggest benefit that we got from the holy month of Ramadan. And this is why the month of Ramadan is holy in itself. Imagine today, we went through, or this month, we went through Valentine's, right? People go through their birthdays. People go through other anniversaries, July 4th, whatever it is, right? And they hold some significance to that day. Imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you the significance of Ramadan. And for you, it's something simple, right? And you really don't even fathom that idea. Every person, whether you celebrate something or you don't, we know the importance of the concept of anniversary, right? Something that we look forward to. Even aging, which is not even something you should look forward to, right? But you feel like you should do something. You should acknowledge that day when it comes by, right? But imagine the month of Ramadan, which is longer, more valuable than anything in your life, right? And more valuable than all the other months in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal, we do not hold the same weight to it. Ikhwani, this is something that we should really think and ponder about, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls this the month of Quran. Then what is your relationship with Quran? Forget about the neglect, or forget about the slacking, or even if you strive throughout the whole year. But what are you going to do when it comes to Quran in this month? The Prophet ﷺ, Jibreel would be summoned to him to revise every single night with the Prophet ﷺ and read the Quran to him. And he would read it back to the Prophet, back to Jibreel alayhi salam. What do you do every single night in Ramadan? And if you plan to do something in Ramadan, then what have you done to prepare it? There's no way you could go without having any type of relationship with the Quran and expect somehow that you're going to be consistent throughout the month of Ramadan. That's not how it works, right? It's just like you not being able to work out or drag yourself to commit to a habit and then suddenly being 30 days consistent. It's a struggle. It's a struggle, right? And people talk about that psychology-wise. They talk about how long it takes for you to have or and enable yourself to commit to a habit, right? That in itself takes weeks or months, right? So we don't have that time in Ramadan, ikhwani. Make sure you set a portion of your time to revise the Quran. Revise the Quran starting from today. Starting from today. Because you cannot afford to miss a day without Quran throughout Ramadan, right? And in order for you to embody this trait, right, having a good relationship with the Quran, this has to be something consistent. The Salaf, may Allah be pleased with them, would spend 6 months eagerly asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep their soul in their body so they could see another Ramadan. And then when they finished that Ramadan, they would spend the following 6 months asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept their Ramadan. To accept their Ramadan. And again, we get remembered by Ramadan by a couple of events, right? Before Ramadan, and then we forget Ramadan, and then move on with everything else. And then, subhanAllah, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, except those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides. And I'm no better than anyone else here, but some of us actually dread Ramadan, right? We feel the spirit, but we're waiting for vibes. We're waiting for like a lecture or the spirit of Ramadan to kind of shower down on us, right? But we see it as a month of struggle. We see it as a month of thirst or whatever it is, right? And an imbalance that we have in our day-to-day lives. Yes, we do love Ramadan, but how are we embracing it like we should, right? And this is a khillah or illah in ourselves that we have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reveal us from this. The ulama, the salaf that we're supposed to look up to after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they speak about their nature with Ramadan, in particular to Quran. In Sahih Muslim, it was narrated that the Prophet ﷺ asked his companions, and he said, Abu Hurairah narrates this, he says that, he asks first, he says, who has fasted today? Abu Bakr raises his hand. And then the Prophet ﷺ asks, who visited a sick person today? Abu Bakr raises his hand. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, who followed a janazah, who prayed on a dead person today? Abu Bakr raises his hand. And then he says, who visited a sick person today? Abu Bakr raises his hand again. Imagine 4 deeds: fasting, visiting the poor, right? And praying over a dead person, right? Attending a funeral, and feeding a poor person, right? Abu Bakr did all 4. The Prophet ﷺ, this hadith is in Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ says, whoever combines all of these actions in one day, then he will enter Jannah. He will enter Jannah. He says he will surely enter Jannah. Akhwani, when you're in Ramadan, it should be a time for you to tighten your belt, right? And strive and do much more than you do throughout the other months, right? It shouldn't be an excuse for you to say, I'm fasting, I have low energy, and I'm going to do as much as I can. Tarawih and Siyam, and that's enough for me. But that was not Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. That was not Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, right? And that was not the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His generosity did not have any limits. Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, he never would break his fast alone. He never would break his fast alone. Out of generosity, every time his family would prepare iftar for him, he would go out and seek 2 poor individuals to have iftar with him. If he was out and he did not join his family and they left some food for him, he would look at the food, go find masakin, and if he did not find any masakin, he would not even eat that food. Right? It is have the taste, knowing that he's eating and he's able to feed somebody else and was not able to. Imam Ahmad would ask for food. And the fuqara would come to Imam Ahmad, may Allah be pleased with him, and they would ask him for food. And he would give them their food. And it was narrated that a time one of his students witnessed that he was fasting and a poor person came to him. And they asked him for food. And the only thing he had was 2 small little chunks of bread. He gave it, the students aware of this, he gave it to that poor person. And then he went home, he went inside his room, he started reading the Quran until he fell asleep. And then he woke up and he fasted that next day. So he did not have any iftar. He went from fast to fast. He could have simply told that person, I'm fasting as well. And inshallah, let's split this, take one and I'll take one, right? Or I need this for either iftar or suhoor. But he did not do that. He went from fast to fast. And this is just on the account of one incident by one of his students. Imagine the stuff that he has concealed, right? And is only doing for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Al-Hasan al-Basri was like that too. Al-Hasan al-Basri would be fasting and he would be so sincere with it, concealing it, that he would invite many of his friends and he would be serving them the drinks and pouring them drinks and serving them food, right? Knowing that he's fasting. And we can't even do that. You're cooking a little bit of food, you're hungry, you're complaining or you're talking about it, right? This is we're human being, that's perfectly fine. But this was not how the Salaf were. That was not how the Salaf were. There was no room for you to complain about when you see the true value of Ramadan. When you understand the exponential ajr that you're getting from Ramadan and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showering us. If you find any illness or any laziness within you, know that the shaitan, you are the shaitan. The shaitans are locked away this month. So inshallah, try to fight off the shackles of yourselves, right? The shackles of yourselves. Outside of this month, it's the shackles of the shaitan, the shackles of society and all that, right? But this month, know that you're the problem, right? You start making yourself excuses and doing this and doing that. It'd be like, I'm the problem. I'm the shaitan. The shaitan's within me, right? That's the reality of it, all right? As for the Quran, some of the words of the Salaf, may Allah be pleased with them, looking at some of their recitation habits, right? It was narrated on Al-Aswad, who was a companion of Ibn Mas'ud. He would recite the Quran every 2 nights in Ramadan. Every 2 nights in Ramadan. Al-Nakha'i, he would do the same, but when it came to the last 10 days, he would recite the Quran in every 4 days. Imam Shafi'i, may Allah be pleased with him, our scholar, the madhab of our madhab, it was narrated that he would recite the Quran 60 times in Ramadan. 60 times in Ramadan. And I told this before at another lecture. There's a brother I watched, a Somali brother. He was getting ijazah. It's recent. It's a video on YouTube. He sat down, he recited the Quran from cover to cover, and he did it in 7 hours, right? So if Imam Shafi'i was reciting the Quran 60 times, it's 14 hours, right? 14 hours just dedication to be able to do that amount per day. You're able to do something if you're really committed to it. Wallahi, there's students here that are medical students or other and competitive degrees pursue Grenadian. To them, time doesn't matter, right? Especially when it's almost 4+ years, right? But Ramadan is only 1 month. If you're obsessed and you have a goal in your mind, wallahi, time will not make a difference. There's brothers out here that would go out and spend their Ramadan right now just to and relieve themselves from the hunger. They would spend more time at lifetime than they would outside this month, right? To them, those hours of sweating and burning calories, right, is something that they're trying to use to distract themselves. Replace those times with the times that you spend with the Quran. With the Quran. Qatada, may Allah be pleased with him, he completed the Quran every 7 days. And in Ramadan, he would complete it every 3 days. And in the last 10 days, he would complete it every 2 nights. Every 2 nights. Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her. She would wake up after praying Taraweeh. She would wake up and pray Salat Subh. And then she would hold on to the Quran and recite it till long after the hours of the sunrise, right? So whatever portion or whatever time that you can find for the mothers, the wives, the students, no one has an excuse, right? The Sahaba, the Prophet ﷺ, the Salaf, they all had their own forms of allocating special time to the Quran, right? So do not give yourself an excuse. And know that whatever you can't do this month, wallahi, you will not be able to do it outside this month. And this is a swear, right? Because the shaitans are locked up. The vibes that you're expecting are here, right? Whether you fully feel it or not. And everyone else is striving, right? Everyone else is striving, right? So even the worst of the worst, right? Of our friends, our circles, whatever it is, are still finding a way to find themselves into the masjid and pour into the masjid. You'll see that starting actually from Jum'ah today, there's much more people in the masajids, right? Even for the people that have excuses, somehow they would want to be part of the jama'ah, right? So if you see all this and it's not enough for you, then ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide you and guide us as well. We are in need of that guidance. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those that follow the good and accept the haqq no matter what, right? And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make all of our deeds in His name. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our parents who strived and made sure to teach us the deen and are one way or another part of the reasons that we are here today, and to forgive our dead. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not make this Ramadan the last Ramadan, and to make all of our settings in majalis al-khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.